Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and this will be the final session of this conference. This session 3 is on GPEDC principles at core, envisioning the future of development finance governance. This session will be preceded by Dr. Kim Ji-hyun, Research Fellow of Science and Technology Policy Institute. So please welcome our moderator and speakers with a big hand. Thank you. And I will now hand over the mic to our Dr. Kim. Please proceed.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to session 3 of the 18th Seoul ODA International Conference. It's great pleasure to be here with you all today. I remember back in 2011 and 2012 when we gathered in Busan for the high-level forum on aid effectiveness. Well, at that time, as I look back now, I think our community felt a bit confused and unsettled, I can say. Well, traditional aid was not only one single source for finance anymore. New actors, new instruments, and new cooperative methods were emerging at that time. And there was a strong feeling that we needed a new platform to bring everyone together on equal footing to make development cooperation more effective, more inclusive, and more accountable. That's what I remember. That's how the GPEDC was born. Now, more than 10 years later, I feel the environment has shifted again, maybe even more than before. We are living through what many in the previous sessions described in a poly-crisis era. In this context, the GPEDC is being asked to do more than what it was in Busan. It's not just about aid effectiveness, it's about providing its principles still matter, and it can guide us as we engage with climate finance, blended finance, and private investment. So in this session, I hope that we can reflect together on how the GPEDC has evolved since Busan, how it's functioning now in this complex global moment, and what more we need to do, strengthen it going forward. For that, we are very fortunate to have two distinguished speakers with us today. Ms. Christina Hutler, co-chair of the GPEDC and acting assistant director general at SIDA, and Dr. Devapriya Bhattacharya, distinguished fellow at the Center for Policy Dialogue in Dhaka and a member of the United Nations Committee for Development Policy. Before we begin, let me note that Ms. Hutler will need to leave shortly after her presentation for another commitment. So after Dr. Deb's presentation, Ms. Penny Davis from SIDA will join us in the Q&A and discussion session. So without further delay, let me invite Ms. Hutler to deliver her presentation. Christina, the floor is yours.
Thank you. First, I'd like to start to thanking our host, not only for hosting this ODA conference and the Busan Forum, but also for your very long-standing commitment on the aid effectiveness agenda and building on the legacy from the Busan conference in 2011. This was also when the GDP-EDC was established and the principles for effective development cooperation were endorsed. And it was endorsed by 161 countries and 56 organizations. We also deeply appreciate the active engagement of the Republic of Korea to champion the very strong commitment in the outcome document of the Sevilla conference. Sweden is very proud to be one of the four GPDC co-chairs representing all the bilaterals and the multilaterals providers of development cooperation. And Sweden took on the role as a co-chair in 2023, and we will continue to act as a co-chair until the end of 2026. For those that are not very familiar with the GPDC, let me just a few introductory notes. Let's see here, yes. So it was set up in Busan, as I mentioned, in 2011 to enhance the effectiveness of development cooperation, fostering inclusive partnership as a key component between all stakeholders engaged in development cooperation. I had the privilege of attending the conference in Busan in 2011 and have followed the agenda over the years. And GPDC is really advancing the four effectiveness principles: country ownership, focus on results, inclusive partnerships, transparency and mutual accountability. And the primary added value, I would say, lies in providing an inclusive global multi-stakeholder platform for dialogue and also for knowledge sharing, which I will elaborate a little bit on further. And a key strength of the GPDC's work is that it builds on country-level evidence, so deriving from the Global Monitoring Round, which tracks progress on effectiveness commitment, and that I will come back on. Here, yes. So the theme of this discussion is truly excellent. What has been mentioned several times earlier today in the morning, we all need to think very carefully about the future of development finance and its governance. And as we have also talked about, the Sevilla conference emphasized the need for a paradigm shift in the mobilization, the allocation, and the alignment and management of development finance. The effectiveness agenda and decades of lessons learned must be at the heart, I would say, of this shift, ensuring the effectiveness of all types of development cooperation is really essential in order to improve impact, strengthen partnerships, and mobilize resources for sustainable development. So in short, effectiveness is not supposed to be seen as something add-on. It should guide all of our efforts and should, for example, be part and parcel of all the climate finance work and publicly backed private finance. At this time of global crisis, deepening fragmentation, and also budgetary constraints, which we have all touched upon the different aspects during the day, we need to think carefully and how to make the best use of our public resources to reach the objectives that we have set out in Agenda 2030 and the Financing for Development agenda. So let me emphasize that we firmly believe that the four effectiveness principles are still valid in this evolving development cooperation landscape. And we were therefore very pleased to see in the Compromiso de Sevilla a strong statement on the importance of to uphold a long-standing effectiveness principle, together with a statement on reinvigorating the development cooperation architecture, as stated here on the screen. Also, the outcome document further mentions that GPDC is really a key platform for supporting global knowledge sharing and learning. The outcome document, I would say, it signals a renewed urgency to drive action on the effectiveness of all types of development cooperation. So this includes North-South, it includes South-South, it includes triangular cooperation, of course, as well as the effectiveness of the multilateral development banks. So there is a need to think about how the principles can be applied according to the context in order to stay relevant. And one of the questions that were posed in the concept note for this session was how the principles can be applied to various financing types. And let me reflect on the examples of climate finance, as well as the engagement with the private sector in development cooperation. First, regarding cooperation with the private sector, the private sector has a critical role in creating jobs that lifts people out of poverty, and driving growth, scaling up investment, and unlocking financing and investment opportunities. Sweden, like most providers of development corporations, is now thinking of how we can make use of the public funds to generate more funds for development objectives from private sources. The catalytic role of ODA, and we had a nice example in the previous session on the way we're working with blended finance. Thank you for that note. And when using ODA for such purpose, we need to ensure that the development focus and the effectiveness, of course, of our effort. And as you may know, the 2019 Kampala, the GPDC developed the Kampala principles to provide guidance on the private sector engagement in development cooperation and to make this more effective. And the process was done in an inclusive manner, and the principles have, since they were developed, they have been applied by government, businesses, and other stakeholders. And an assessment of the Kampala principles is now for the first time included in the global monitoring round. And 26 out of the 46 countries are engaged in the monitoring are also undertaking this voluntary assessment of the Kampala principles. And the evidence sheds light on the critical role of the private sector in development partnerships and the need to invest in the enabling environment, laws, regulation, and institutional capacity building for partnering with it. And more specifically, the assessment provides answers to questions related on how development cooperation partners could engage with the private sector and how the principles actually are applied. Some of the examples of questions which the assessment will provide answers to are the following. Is the private sector cooperation aligned with national strategies and priorities? That's one question. Another one could be were goals developed through inclusive processes, i.e. the principle of broad-based country ownership. There were also questions, does private sector engagement in development cooperation deliver results where they are most needed, i.e. the principles of focus on results? And questions on how have government organized national dialogues on private sector engagement in development? Did domestic private sector and civil society organizations participate? So on issues related to the principle of inclusive partnership. And there's also questions related to the principles of transparency and mutual accountability. I think that would be very interesting when we see the final assessments of all the questions that come in. Second, There's another area, the principles and the climate finance area. Yes, let me say just a few words on climate finance. I think we all know that we need to step up in the area and provide more resources for climate adaptation and climate mitigation. However, the climate finance landscape has really become complex and fragmented. So many vulnerable countries, they still struggle to access climate finance. And being eligible doesn't mean being able to access it. There could be complex procedures, long delays, limited capacity, continue to hold countries back. So simplifying access must really be a priority if we want finance to reach those who need it most. And effectively addressing climate change and biodiversity loss also requires equitable access to finance. Need to prioritize locally led driven initiatives as well as coordinated partnerships. And applying the 4 effectiveness principles to climate finance, that helps ensure resources are used fairly, in a transparent way and with the maximum impact. So it's a very good example on how to apply the different effectiveness principles. Furthermore, I think it's also very important to avoid relearning what we already know. Decades of experiences in development cooperation have shown that ignoring effectiveness principles leads to fragmentation, it leads to misalignment and poor results. So climate finance is not really a separate track. It must be treated as part of the broader development agenda. For SIDA, the starting point for our development, including climate finance, is to work in line with the principles. And we are actively engaged also in the OECD DAC work on this agenda. For example, the report for 2023, More Effective Delivery of Climate Action in Developing Countries. So let me give some examples of how the principles are relevant for climate finance. Country ownership. I would say climate finance here should align with national climate strategies. As providers, we need to coordinate our efforts, including around locally led climate action that empowers local communities. And engaging civil society is key to building a broad consensus. This is something that we have worked on for many years. Focusing on results, funding should of course target measurable climate and development outcomes, such as emission reductions, resilience building, and just transitions. High-level pledges means very little if they don't translate into tangible results on the ground. And we have inclusive partnerships. Here, climate finance flow should bring together governments, civil society, private sector, local authorities, and community on an equal footing, and to support local private sectors, actors in green transition, I would say is also key. On transparency and mutual accountability, here climate finance flows must be transparent and all stakeholders must be able to hold each other to account for how funds are used and the results achieved. This can build trust, and in this regard, to combat and prevent all types of corruption is a key priority for Swedish development cooperation. And then the second question posed for this session, what roles and functions should GDPC establish as a platform for development finance governance to contribute to inclusive and effective corporate system? I'll give two examples of how GPDC contributes in driving this agenda. One of GPDC's key roles is to drive evidence-based dialogues for change. I alluded to that in the very beginning. And the main tool we have for that is our global monitoring round, which follow-ups on and how the results are put into practice at the country level. And since 2011, when it was all started, we have more than 100 partner countries have undertaken this exercise in collaboration with hundreds of development partners and local actors. We have 59 countries signed up, and 46 countries are actively progressing in the ongoing round, which spans between 2023 and 2026. And across all the different continents. And the results are starting to come out. And the observations for the first half of countries to complete the data collection are published on our website, and more will follow. So within a short time frame, we will have a lot of results to dig into and learn based on that. I really like to emphasize how important this work is. It offers us a learning platform, accountability tool to track progress, of course, and drive action. The monitoring system has gone through a reform process, and a new feature is that we have a multi-stakeholder dialogues. And they will take place at country level to reflect on the results, facilitate learning, jointly formulate plans to translate findings into operations and actions. And this is a new feature of this new round. As of today, we have 24 partner countries that have either held or are actively planning for these action dialogues. And we have a global dashboard which you can follow the progress country by country, really something to look into. Another example of how GPDC contributes to driving this agenda is a platform for joint action. The 2030 Pact for Effective Development Cooperation was launched in Sevilla, and this has been referred to, and it's the so-called Sevilla Platform for Action initiative. And it's part of the official follow-up process of the FFD. Although the initiative came from the GPDC, it's not a formal GPDC process as such. The initiative is a collective ambition with a vision to progress on FFD and related commitments to revitalize development effectiveness in a radically changed context. As I mentioned, we will not reinvent the wheel, and the Busan principles for effective development cooperation will really be at the core of the pact. On a more practical level, the pact proposes development effectiveness dialogues and or also regional learning hubs for evidence-based learning and knowledge sharing among peers, among partners on issues of common interest identified by the members. So as of yet, there are 28 countries or entities from all over the world that have joined. So here we have the different countries and entities. And this pact is an example of trying to pool resources and bridge between different development finance government platform. And I really welcome everyone to join in this pact. I will end on that note. Thank you for being part of this panel.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Christina. You really highlighted the current efforts underway to apply GPEDC principles in practice. So thank you very much for the presentation. And since Christina has to leave us now, let's give her a round of applause before she parts. Now it's a great pleasure to introduce our second speaker, Dr. Debapriya Bhattacharya. Deb, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Moderator, for giving me the floor. Very good afternoon to all of you. Let me tell you the first good news. The first good news, we are all again here in Seoul to celebrate the development cooperation agenda. And I cannot imagine, without the Republic of Korea, its Ministry of Foreign Affairs, KOICA, would have been able to survive this or keep alive this agenda, both from the mobilization and effectiveness point of view, for very long. So if there is one trusted mother angel for the GPEDC and the development effectiveness agenda, then it's Republic of Korea. Give the Republic of Korea Minister of Foreign Affairs, KOICA, and my Korean academics, the Korean academics who have kept this agenda so vibrant and all through over there. For me, Republic of Korea remains the North Star for the development cooperation agenda. I'm so grateful to be here again. I haven't been here on a number of occasions. A couple of years back, I gave the keynote on the GPEDC, and I called it, "It is time to think of a GPEDC 2.0, a radical view, which some may create discomfort for others. But if we do not progress intellectually, we won't be able to progress effectively organizationally." That is something out there. The good news is that I have written it down in a book now, and the book is available. Routledge has just published it. It's called The Effective Development Cooperation, New Evidence from Global South. All the principles which Christina was talking about, we have tested them on the ground in 6 countries through 3 sectors, and also much more closely with thematic analysis across the countries, what used to be said. Having said that, which essentially means that what I would have said here is already available in the market. What can be purchased in the market should not be given free to this conference over there. Isn't that a right approach for an economist on that? So what I have done is that I scrapped my PowerPoint and listening to all of you throughout the day. And I won't tell you, although the Korean patrons do love me, they love me so much, they have made me the last speaker of the last session in a one-day conference. You know, this is the extreme tough love you can only show by making somebody the last speaker of the last session of a one-day conference. So I will make you suffer too by saying that this PowerPoint is gone. What I have is now, for the last half an hour, I was trying to articulate what are my takeaways, what I'm going to take back home from another conference by collecting so much of carbon miles coming from Bangladesh. So here are my, how many takeaways you are ready for? How many? 7. So you're lucky, I have 5 only. So let me take the first one. The first one is that if development cooperation has to move into its next phase, it needs to have a new narrative. It needs to have a new narrative. The Sevilla was good, but not good enough to establish that new narrative. The new narrative has to come both horizontally and vertically, longitudinally as well. So how do I look at it, the matrix? The role of ODA, and it's an ODA conference, I'm talking about ODA, has to be rediscovered. The new role of the ODA in terms of plugging the development cooperation or the development needs or the market imperfections or in terms of the public expenditure or social sector allocations needs to be revisited in a comprehensive way. But as we look at the new role, we also have to look into the new risks which are associated with the new role of the ODA. This is how a matrix has to be. TOSD has tried to respond to that up to a point, given the donor fatigue which is there. The taxpayers in the OECD countries are definitely asking, why should we pay for misgovernance, corruption, and all types of problems in other countries? I think it is time that we build that narrative, not only based on the supply side, that is to be gone, but also from the demand side, how the interests of both sides, provider and the recipients, converge in the new global context. TOSD, as I said, tried to address part of it, but it did not address the demand side of it. The debate discourse on global public good is one of the way of addressing that problem between supply and demand side over there. So the challenge to the thinkers, those who are here, including my group of people, is that to do a retreat and think through how this new narrative has to be built, which can really energize the development cooperation debate, which we desperately need to continue in the coming days. The first one. Did you agree with that? I didn't understand. If you do not clap on that, how do I know that you have agreed with me? Colleagues, you have to engage, otherwise I cannot speak. I need also inspiration, huh? It's the last speaker of the first day of the last session. What is the second takeaway for me, beyond the narrative? The second one, the Sevilla. Those who have seen the compromise or the outcome document, those who have followed it from the very beginning, the very initial zero draft was a very good one. And we have seen before our eyes how it was sequentially diluted over time, how the commitments became aspirational, how the data requirements became blurred, how the indicators vanished in from that, and the framework weakened in that way. So the issue which has come over here, all the good words, and I agree with the good words, I have seen how it has survived in the political debates, now has to be translated. If you are not measured, you are not counted. That is what we said when SDG was being done. And it is time now to have a good monitoring framework over there. Since it does not, and I'm sure my UN DESA colleagues will be doing the needful in terms of developing the data need, the indicators, the commitments, how they relate to special action, to special in institutions, on all these things still there. But this is a global level thing. What people like us, particularly in the South, what we will be doing is we're going to do a shadow framework and see how it is being implemented on the ground. Not at the global level, but how it is changing the lives of the people in the South, the real left behind people, and how they are related to the changes, commitments which are globally being made. The second issue is there, we need to have a framework which is going to monitor accurately on real-time databases, not all old data, with proper benchmarking, the incremental changes which we are seeing, and the coherence between the global commitments and the coherence in terms of the country-level recipients' performance over there, the behavioral changes which we will want to see between the recipients and the providers. So the second issue is that we need to have a monitoring framework strong enough to follow up the promises in the Seville Declaration document over there. You agree? Thank you. Let me move to the third issue. The third issue is that if you look at the Seville outcome document, I was expecting, as the biggest cheerleader of the GPEDC, there would be more reflection of the GPEDC content in the Seville document. Madam Chair, thank you for nodding your head in agreement. Thank you. At least on the monitoring issue and on the landscape issue, they're going to use the GPEDC monitoring data over there. I call the GPEDC monitoring as the jewel in the crown of GPEDC. The jewel in the crown of GPEDC is this monitoring framework. I have had the privilege of being appointed as a member of the joint support team in the expert group to redesign the monitoring framework. The current monitoring framework which is being implemented, I have had some contribution to it. Don't blame me for that. I had other members too over there. So the second thing which we need to do is to establish much more interface between the GPEDC and the implementation of the Seville outcome. It has been said that we need to do a work plan. Colleague has mentioned that you need to do a action program, but I think it will be useful to establish that linkages, not only from the point of view of aspiration and indicators or principles, but also frameworks, including the monitoring thing I have mentioned earlier. So my third demand is that let us go through how do we establish more consonance, more interface between the GPEDC and the Seville outcome over there. That's my third takeaway. You agree? The fourth issue, doing more with less. That is the name of the game, which essentially means more mobilization and more effectiveness. And you have heard throughout the day how it has to be done. For GPEDC and ODA, and all the points which I'm saying are interrelated and mutually dependent in many ways. They come more as a package. Is that we have seen the principles of GPEDC, and my study also tries to check out the evidence, and my predecessor has been speaking about the evidence, and we have given evidence in terms of how they really diverge from the principles in reality and how they are contextually very specific. So the second issue, the fourth issue which comes up is that GPEDC and the world itself is operating in a complex reality. If it is operating in a complex reality, how do you take note of the specificities or the contextual realities within which GPEDC is being implemented or development cooperation is being implemented? Look at the changing profile of the recipient. You will find hardly any low-income countries nowadays. Most of them are low-middle-income countries, and those who are left behind are essentially countries in conflict, fragile states, or climatically very affected SIDs, what we call in the Pacific and elsewhere. So, how do you move from principles to processes and processes to outcome? The assumption was that if you have good principles, you will lead to good processes. And if you have a good process, you assure success in terms of outcome. But life is more complex than that. That between your principles and processes and outcomes, there are lots of other peculiarities and complexities and contextual realities which we will have to abide by. GPEDC tried to do its adjustment. It introduced the issue of fragile states. The GPEDC made the introduction of fragile states and tried to address that issues up to a point. But we need much more over there. So the issue is over here. Once we approach the GPEDC in its next phase, how do you really take note of these complex realities? The processes which have been mentioned, including the multi-stakeholder dialogues, in countries where there is no democracy, in countries where there is high level of corruption, whether the corporate principles are also being violated, and even the United Nations agencies feels quite constrained. How do you really implement the GPEDC principles in this country where there is democratic deficit? How can you really achieve development outcomes within democratic deficits? So I think this is a time for GPEDCs to confront the realities and come out what I would call, no offense meant, from the age of innocence. GPEDC needs to come out of its age of innocence and really need to confront the brutal game within which it wants to perform its development aspiration. Do you agree with me? Do I hear that the applaudissements are going down a bit more and more? Your energy level is going down with the sundown? Okay. Last but not the least. How do you respond to this so-called polycrisis through my GPEDC? This is one of the major issues over there. Many of you mentioned polycrisis, but shied away quite often to articulate that or unpack that. That is one of the crises. That we talk about polycrisis, but we shy away from defining it. Otherwise, how we are going to deal with it? Now, let me deal with it at two levels. This is the era of disruptive development. That is what we call, and that's the UNDP's latest definitions. Isn't that disruptive development? I have had a bit of a debate sometimes a couple of weeks back in Hamburg with your Mr. Steiner on that, what exactly it means and what it implies. The issue is that the multilateral system is breaking down. The multilateral system is breaking down, and we are in the era of what has been said, polycentricism. Number of centers of powers are emerging of different orders over there. So how do you really pursue development cooperation, which is based on universal principles of provider and recipient within a polycentric global order? How do you go around in that polycentric global order? And we understand there are new challenges like the humanitarian crisis, the refugee, the climate, and all these things are over there. But it is also true, the development cooperation policy, each of the headquarters will tell us is under the long shadow from the ODA principles to trade and investment, and now on security and strategic interest. Strategic and security concerns are overshadowing that narrative which I've started off with, both demand side and supply side, is being overshadowed by that. In the face of the reciprocal tariff applied by the largest nation in the world, in total violation of multilateral principles, and we see that the rise of the New South and the reorganization of yesterday's enemies becoming foes today under the new polycrisis realities. How will the development cooperation survive under those circumstances? The issue is, the solution of all these things is what my center is all about. My center is called Center for Policy Dialogue. Without dialogue, there is no solution to it. We'll have to have a dialogue which will bridge the divide between, on the one hand, between the North and the South, and on the other hand, abandoning our age of innocence. Those who are in favor of development cooperation, should know how to talk to the people who deal with security and strategic interest. We will have to understand what are their concerns, and we'll have to plant our concerns over there. I'm waiting. I won't make you clap anymore, Father, you know. You see, Mark Twain once said that in order to have an impromptu speech, you need 3 weeks of preparation. I, for my impromptu speech, had 3 hours. Thank you for those generous for applauding me and encouraging me so much. I love being with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Deb. Thank you for those thought-provoking, insightful, action-calling, everything speech. Thank you very much. At this stage, I'd like to welcome Ms. Penny for the discussion. Well, I will take several questions from the audience first. Then if we have some more minutes left, then I will add up some questions to those presenters. Let me... Okay, this is for Christina Hutler. Penny, can you?
Oh, sorry.
You can use.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah. Me to respond. Thank you for the question, and I think partly that was answered by Christina. But just to say, I mean, also picking up on your very funny and provocative presentation on the principles and how to adapt to this new development cooperation landscape, we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, or sort of reinvent the wheel. I mean, the principles, as Christina mentioned, are still valid. And the question is, of course, how to apply them. How can the principles be adapted to new actors? And risk of repeating here, but we are excited about the fact that we do have a new feature in the global monitoring round. For the first time, we're doing an assessment of the Kampala principles. The Kampala principles is all about enhancing the effectiveness of private sector engagement in development cooperation, or rather, how can we work more effectively together? And that's about issues like how can we promote the local private domestic sector? How can we make sure that private finance and these new actors are aligned with what we want to achieve? Because we do have a joint objective here, and that's working better together. So I think, I mean, a lot of it is built into this new monitoring round. And the principles we argued in the negotiation process ahead of the Seville conference are still valid, and therefore we're very pleased to see that they are confirmed in that document, because we don't want to spend a lot of time talking about principles. We want to get to the action phase, and that's what we're doing now in these action dialogues. And I think you alluded to, I mean, we need to do more. And you also alluded to accountability. And the whole process of the monitoring round is a huge accountability exercise.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Then the question for Dr. Deb.
In the era of global crisis, what governance reforms are most critical for GPEDC to remain relevant and effective in guiding? Very good question. Colleagues, when I was young, I'm still young, I used to think that I have answers for everything. It's just you put me on the table. Now I know that giving a good question is much more important than giving the answer. So the question is very good. I think I'll appreciate the question. The GPDC governance issue is very important to start with in that way. So there was a time when there was no recipient countries representation in the process. But now we do have that, and the steering committee is composed of joint leadership. Then we didn't have at a time civil society representation. Then we have the civil society representation. And although they are non-executive, I think so still on that. But then on the country level, we have had the government doing things. Now they also try to, at least as a pro forma exercise, consult the civil society. But as I have mentioned, that many countries do not have adequate democracy. They have loved civil society and unloved civil society. They do not consult the critical civil society. They consult only those who are falling in line in that way. So those are probably. Then the issue of the engagement of the private sector. And when we have the private sector, we can talk about this private sector for profit, but we do not have adequate representation of the growing contribution of the non-profit private sector, the private philanthropy and others, and how do you really engage with them. And then you have the South and those dual role of the South. You just heard Peru, Mexico and others. Even countries like Bangladesh is also building roads in Myanmar and hosting 1.2 million refugees in our countries. So the roles have really become diffused. But the governance structure of the GPDC is yet to capture that realities. And it is not easy. I'm saying it's not easy. It is still the DAC approach in many ways, the ODA providers, and I appreciate that because ODA remains the most critical element of the development cooperation. So we'll have to think through how we can really have more effective cooperation. The cooperation reform, the governance problem is, again, as coming from developing countries, I tell you, what the government says is not necessarily what the people think. So in those countries where there is democracy deficit, how do you really account for that in the monitoring process and in the management process? This is something, otherwise the impact assessment will be difficult, particularly at a disaggregated level, whether it is benefiting the left behind people or the crony capitalism or the kleptocrats in the country over there. So this is a challenge, and countries, multilateral organization cannot intervene in the sovereign domain of the state. That much we understand. That is where we have to think through in an innovative way how the governance can respond to it. Thank you.
Penny?
No, I mean, this is the key question, of course. And just to mention, I've been following this process as a civil society activist for many years. So the governance and the sort of shrinking space and democratic deficit issues. But, I mean, what we have here is a platform that encompasses all stakeholders engaged in development cooperation. And that's pretty unique. And that's something that we should promote and make use of in an age when multilateralism is under fire. So we get out of this what we put in, and everyone is welcome. And I would say the governance structure has evolved. It's not a DAC process. We have South-South cooperation providers, we have MDB representatives, we have the whole UN system, civil society, private sector, and philanthropic organizations, which I forgot to mention. So it's a coalition of the willing, wanting to be more effective.
Thank you. Thank you for...
May I add one sentence?
Oh, yeah.
This is not an afterthought. It is just, I'm getting old, don't remember everything at one time. So the other, in terms of improvement, is in governance structure, if you allow me, is this much more closer engagement of the OECD providers at the country level. If you look at those, if you go to the, well-meaning, like-minded donors or development partners, and you talk to them about GPDC, many of the counselor development cooperation or first secretary development cooperation do not know anything about it. They have hardly interacted with the GPDC. And if you ask their cooperation in terms of filling up the monitoring exercise, and they would say, I don't have staff time for this kind of things. How am I going to do that? So if the issue of governance starts with ownership issue, it has to start with my providing countries country-level presence in many ways. That's another point I wanted to mention on the governance. Thank you.
I'd like to have one more question for each of you. Okay. Okay.
Sorry, they're shifting here. Are there two questions for me? Or
Yeah, first question, how can the GPDC principles be applied to improve transparency and accountability in development finance governance?
Okay, yeah, I mean, transparency is of course one of the four key effectiveness principles, which is being followed up in the global monitoring round. So, I mean, how to apply and improve transparency and accountability is sort of built into the monitoring exercise. But it's not about monitoring. I mean, again, risk of repeating myself here, but now we're putting more emphasis of making use of the results. When we see that there are accountability challenges, when we see there are transparency issues, we want to move further. We want to go to the next step, the action. So what's exciting now is to see that partner countries who are driving this process are now summoning their development partner to sit down, look at the results from the monitoring round and ask those kind of questions. What to do? What's the action needed to take to improve transparency, etc. So that's the new feature. And of course, we're in the middle of this process. 26 countries, I think, have held these action dialogues at country level. We've published the first results from the first half of countries doing monitoring. So results are yet to be seen.
May I respond to that question?
The next question is related to the questions to you. Okay?
Do you want me to?
Okay.
On the transparency issue, there is a simple answer which comes from our latest book. You see, what happens is that country A says we have given $20 to country B, and the country B has received only $15. So where did this $5 go? Usually the mirror data should be equal in that way. The issue is that then we try to check what happened because the country framework says that your country has been credited with $20, but we have never received those. So the issue is that that out of those $5, we have accounted for the staff time in the headquarter who has been involved in distributing, and then after some time you find that $2 have gone to pay for the upkeep of the migrants from your country. So the migrants from my country has been accounted for in that particular money which has been accorded to the country. So what is important, if you ask me what transparency exercise, make all the expenditure transparent. In that sense, what has been given and what has been accounted for. Data transparency is the beginning of the transparency exercise. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This was the question that I want to ask you, but you already answered the questions, I guess. This is about the AI-driven.
You'd like to add something?
No, you go ahead. You go ahead.
No, the digitalization of the data system, integration of the data system, and has been mentioned earlier on the TOSD, interoperability of the data system, these are very, very critical. So we are dealing with different types of data system, different methodology, and how it's been done. And there is a misperception in the country level that there is an international data system. They often forget there is no international data system. All national data system feeds into the international data system. And the international agencies, what they do is they establish the comparability in many ways so that the trend analysis can be done on that. So I think that is very important that we get into that. But if you ask that what exactly the next step for data system, what we would like to see on the impact and AI driven, that is the disaggregation of the data system by the left behind vulnerable groups in terms of impact, particularly in the final days of the SDGs. And we also want to see that impact in terms of the left behind groups and also the distributive justice which has been done in terms of the composition and the demand side over there. The allocative priorities as there changes, how the data will really feed into the allocative priorities, not only the global aggregate level, not the sectoral level, but also coming back from the need level on the demand side factors over there. So the AI data-driven system will establish the interoperability and also to look into the national data system in real time will may be able to pick them up and ensure their integrity in the future. I see that it's happening. And the next part of the AI-driven data system is to access the big data. The big data system which are available with the credit card, with the microfinance institutions, and which are available, the fintech organizations need to be brought in order to have more real-time data in terms of the demand side, the consumer spending, the poverty issues, and others. So this is the data revolution we thought of during SDGs. It has now slowed down a bit. I think investment are necessary, and countries like Korea could be one of the other champions in this case over there. Thank you.
Thank you. Penny, you want to add something?
Yeah, this is, of course, one of the new frontiers in development cooperation, AI-driven data systems and access to data. And we don't have the answers to that excellent question, but what we do have is a process. And here also the pact, the 2030 Pact for Effective Development Cooperation comes in. This is a coalition of the willing. And what we will do in this pact is to get down together and discuss these sort of priority issues, new frontiers, to see how we can put them into action. So we are designing, as we speak, development effectiveness dialogues and regional learning labs based on issues of common concern, also coming out from the monitor round, but these kinds of issues have come up as potential questions to explore together. So it's definitely something we will come back to. Thanks.
Okay. Well, it's time to wrap up, I guess. It was the last question, unexpectedly. What a session, I guess. In just 1 hour, we touched upon so many issues related to the GPEDC, from Busan Principle to AI-driven databases, transparencies. Well, it's time to digest all the issues in our mind. I hope the discussion has sparked further reflection and engagement. Lastly, I want to sincerely thanks to wonderful speakers, Ms. Christina Hutler and Dr. Debapriya Bhattacharya, as well as Ms. Penny Davis, joining the discussion. Of course, thanks to all of you for active participation and very wonderful questions. Thank you very much.
Please give a big hand to our moderator and panelists for challenging our perspectives and expanding our collective knowledge. Thank you once again, and we would like to invite you back to your seats. Thank you. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is with heavy heart to bring the speeches and discussions of the 18th Seoul ODA International Conference to a close. As we look back on today's inspiring program, it is time to hear some final words that will truly close our gathering on a memorable note. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome His Excellency Lee Eun-young, Vice President of COICA, for the closing remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome with a big hand.
네, 방금 소개받은 코이카.
Ladies and gentlemen, as I was introduced, my name is Lee Eun-young from COICA. From morning up until the evening, we had a one-day conference, and the majority of the audience are Korean, so please allow me to give the closing remark in Korean. I beg for your kind understanding for that. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for staying with us until the very end. Your presence honored this occasion. Especially my special thanks goes to all the speakers, moderators, and panelist members both offline and online. Thank you so much for your kind participation, and that thankness is first part of my closing remark. Thank your active participation. As you just saw in the final session, we are behind the schedule because of active participation from the audience, and that was quite a successful discussion took place. And as a host, I'm very delighted to say it. Everyone, as you just saw, I think I had a problem with it, but the speakers and panelist members brought up more diverse topics and discussions from all walk of life, and their participation, presentation, discussion added so many colors to the talk we had. Taking this opportunity, I express my deepest gratitude to all the speakers. Please give a big round of applause once again to all the speakers and panelists. Let me briefly summarize what has been discussed. Today's discussion focused on the rapidly changing global environment and the new need or new narrative of the global development cooperation. We suggested the future direction at Sevilla and the mobilization of SDG-focused fund, private-public engagement, and the importance of GPEDC were once again confirmed. Also, we shared the experience of multiple institutions to expand the boundary of cooperation while solidifying the cooperation between us. And to summarize what has been discussed, first, in the first session, under the title of the result of the Fourth Industrial Conference on Finance for Development and Korea's Contribution, introduced the norms and direction established following the Sevilla Commitment Declaration and examined the significance and transparent and comprehensive measurement of development finance through the TOS framework. It was also proposed that Korea, as a responsible partner, can contribute to international development cooperation reform, particularly improving development finance governance. The second session, entitled Development Finance and Partnership Strategy for Mobilization, Linkage, and Coordination, discussed innovative partnership and financial strategies to effectively combine private and public resources. That includes diverse approaches such as donor-led private investment, incentive fund, blended finance strategies, triangular cooperation, which leverage intergovernmental cooperation models, as well as private-public investment fund as well. Finally, in the last session, under the title of the Future of Development Finance Governance through the lens of GPEDC principle, discussed the validity and scalability of the four GPEDC principles, emphasizing the need to expand their application to climate and private finance cooperation. Furthermore, it reaffirmed that these principles must form a foundation for future governance and should be further revitalized. Especially the final speaker, Dr. Debraya Bhattacharya, gave us a lot of insight. And when I was an ambassador to Bangladesh, as you saw, Bangladesh has a special tie with Korea. Some of you might not be aware, but Bangladesh from the day of independence has been working with Korea in terms of technical assistance, contributing greatly to the growth of Bangladesh. So as a former ambassador, I'm delighted to set a success. As Dr. said, thank you so much for your contribution. Distinguished guests and participants, today's international conference sent a clear message to us all. As I said, the Sevilla commitment must go beyond mere declaration and translate into action. Innovative finance involving both the private and public sector is no longer optional. And we have reaffirmed that GPEDC must be expanded and evolved at the heart of all development finance governance. KOICA will also strive to implement reforms based on partnership with donor and partner countries during this transition period and work with the international community to build a sustainable future. Once again, I extend my gratitude to the moderator and speakers for today's insightful presentation and lively discussion, and to all participants for your attentive listening throughout the day until the very end. Thank you so much. Also, my special thanks goes to our staff who showed their dedication and hard work in ensuring the successful hosting of the international conference. All the staff members, thank you so much for your hard work. Finally, I'd like to conclude the session by quoting management scholar Peter Drucker. The greatest danger in times of turbulence is not the turbulence, it is to act with yesterday's logic. Going forward with an open mind and determination towards reform and change, we must move forward together in preparation for new cooperation. Thank you very much. Let's go together.
your attention.
Yes, thank you very much, Vice President Lee, for the inspiring remarks. And may the spirit of partnership and cooperation guide us in advancing sustainable development with all of you here today. Thank you once again. And now this brings us to the end of the 18th Seoul ODA International Conference. On behalf of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and COICA, we would like to thank all of our on and offline participants for making this event even more meaningful and worthwhile. And thank you so much for staying with us till the end. Now, before we close, there's a few housekeeping notes that I would like to deliver. We are conducting a satisfaction survey, so please take a moment to submit your response, and selected participants will be receiving a coffee coupon. And we would deeply appreciate if you would leave your receivers on your desk or return them on your way out at the entrance station. And lastly, please check your belongings before you leave. Thank you so much for your cooperation and support, and we wish you safe journeys back home. Thank you.